welcome back into Mining Stock Daily, everybody. Trevor Hall here. We have a corporate introduction to a new guest on the show, and that's Mr. Jim Paterson, who's the chairman and CEO of Valore Metals. Valore trades on the TSX with the symbol VO and also on the OTC with KVLQF. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Trevor, great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to kind of take this in kind of more of an introduction to your project in Brazil. You've got a district play there, PGE project called the Pedra Branca. Pardon my pronunciation if it's wrong. The Pedra Branca zone or project, northeastern Brazil. This has kind of been an interesting play for you, and you are also part of Discovery Group as well, I may add. So great backing there with that group and John Robbins and his group of financiers. Give us kind of a basic introduction into this project, working in Brazil, and kind of how you came about acquiring it.
Well, I'll start with the last part first. Why did we acquire it to begin with? And it was the company Valore used to be called Kivalliq Energy Corporation, which was a uranium explorer that was formed in 2008. And we had great success from an exploration perspective, but then got blasted out of the water when the pricing for U3O8 or uranium started to really decline, which happened in 2011 and 12, 13, 14, 15. I mean, it's just been kind of a disaster altogether. But along that same time frame, you mentioned Discovery Group. So our group has been quite successful globally, looking for projects that have value, that are undervalued, raising capital for those projects, advancing them through exploration and through the feasibility stage, moving them towards development. And what I recognize is that there were a lot of projects out there that had significant amount of work, both from a project perspective, but also a lot of money spent on infrastructure like access and roads and ports and all that type of thing that will reduce inevitably development costs and increase your margin. And a lot of those projects were held by companies that just were not spending on exploration. They weren't looking for growth. They were thinking from a survival perspective. Let's hold on to our money and not spend money in exploration. And that's a completely opposite view that our group takes. We think there's value added by spending money in exploration if done properly. So we had a couple successes in our group. Around the same time, we decided to rename Kivalliq. We renamed it Valore. We consolidated the capital. We did a rights offering so that those that were in the boat had a chance to row and finance the company to go forward to get us out of our uranium-induced funk. And we moved forward, and we went out looking for projects that sort of fit that scale or that sort of profile that I was talking about. So are they going to be a district scale project? Lots of exploration potential, highly valued mineralization on widespread across a large area. Is there a district potential there? Is there significant capital spent by previous operators and or in the region to give you that leg up? Lots of great data. And then were the guys that were holding onto that project that we were looking to buy it from, had they been spending money on exploration techniques that showed some innovation? That were they looking for new ways to add value, incorporating technology that's been developed over the last 5 or 10 years. And in most cases, most projects had not. But there were some real opportunities out there for us, and this was one of them. I looked at the valuation of Jangada, which is the AIM-listed company that held the Pedra Branca project, and it was quite low relative to the fact that they were touting a pretty high IRR, or a high value project that seemingly was pretty close to development in an area of Brazil that I thought was quite mining friendly, and they had high grade mineralization. They had a big land package, access was great, all these things that we look for, but their valuation was low. And the guys that held the project said that they were listed on an AIM, and they potentially were having trouble raising capital. Conversely, our group, we've been able to raise capital for projects like this, for exploration projects. And we looked at it differently than them. We said, this is not a project that is, months away, 6 months away from a feasibility and going into production. It's rather the beginning innings of a major exploration project, discovery pipeline that will add value through spending money on drilling and prospecting and rock sampling, and just to show massive scale. So we looked at the same project through different lenses, Jangada and Valore. We came to an agreement on value. They're a big shareholder of our company now. We issued them stock, paid them cash. And for the last year and a few months, we've been sifting through about $35 million worth of data that's been generated by previous operators. We've put a fully functioning Brazilian exploration team on the ground. We've got a really strong board and a very strong Canadian component on the geological and technical side. We're trying to answer questions that will reduce risk and provide upside through drilling, geophysics, metallurgy, processing, rock sorting, all these things that will inevitably determine whether the project has got margin or not. We're trying to answer all those questions. And at the same time, we're trying to pound holes and make discoveries and with the drill rig. And that's really the type of thing that our group has excelled at, Discovery Group, but also Valore.
So Pedra Branca has had decades of work on it. Is your business strategy, I mean, just to kind of put a kind of a blanket metaphor on it, is it to take this project and really kind of hit the brakes on a little bit and use that time, the data, the historical data, and the exploration strategies to really make it even bigger than what once was perceived to be?
I think you need to do both. From my perspective, if you are a company that's only focusing on engineering, the yawn that the investment community will throw at you, it will be pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah.
It's not exciting, right? You need both for a company of our size. If you're a BHP, you can say, look, we're going to take the next 5 years and study the heck out of this thing. And we don't care whether investors lose interest or not, because we don't actually have to raise equity capital. But if you're a little company like ours, a sub 100 million market cap company, you in fact need to generate something that causes people to feel greedy and they want to buy more stock. They want to invest in the company. They think there's upside to come. But at the same time, you have to be realistic. You have to look at this project and start reducing risks and, walking down that checklist, which is what we're doing. So it's both. I mean, literally 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month and a bit ago, was the very first drill results that we've ever put out in the project. So to be thinking about development already is kind of premature. But what we were given when we acquired this project is a significant treasure trove, we call it, of data, over $30 million US worth, like, hundreds of drill holes and very high quality geophysical surveys and huge soil sampling campaigns and almost 80 trenches that had mineralized intervals in them, and as you said, decades and decades and decades of background. So yeah, we can leverage up all of that. But the main thing for us is our investors, like when we're drilling holes and hitting mineralized intercepts in new zones, or we're expanding the inferred resource zones. And so they can say, look, these guys know what they're doing from an exploration potential, and they've chosen a project that they're adding value. This is growing. But what we also know we have to do is we have to go through all those processes to arrive at a project with high margin. So we got to work on ore sorting and ore characterization and different sorting techniques and processing techniques, so that at the very end we come together with a very clear picture. This is the size, this is the scale, this is the grade, and this is how we're going to advance this thing to deliver a project with the highest margin. Whether we do that or if someone comes in and says, thanks for all your hard work, Valore shareholders will pay you for this project and we'll take it from here, which is what our group has done several times.
You did mention you did release some recent drill results out. Can you kind of walk us in some of the highlights and something, how encouraging were these latest results for you?
They were very encouraging, because the most for the most part, this first phase, so phase one, which is now finished, so just to back up, we've got a two-phase exploration program, roughly 3,000 meters in phase one, 3,000 meters in phase two. The first phase of exploration, two-thirds was focused on a target called Trapia 1. And that Trapia 1 forms part of a resource zone we call Trapia. So it was resource expansion for the most part. But when we started drilling, we hit the right rock type, but we hadn't received the assays yet. So we decided to take a break on our drilling and move around to a whole bunch of other targets on the project that we wanted to drill and test. And so they made up a very small component of phase one, but they were important for a number of different reasons. And the first one that I would think, from my perspective, which is most important, is that we had this exploration methodology that we were testing, which was using very high resolution spectral imaging or satellite imagery in conjunction with geophysical reprocessing or airborne geophysics to target these zones. And we did that, and then our team went out and we took rock samples and we came back with some really high-grade platinum numbers, which we released at the end of last year. And then we said, okay, well, now let's roll the truth machine. Is this a zone that's mineralized? And that was when we came back with the discovery that we call CO4. Mm-hmm. So it was like, implementing innovation, which was, I was talking earlier, like the woman who runs the program for us for Worldview is worked for NASA. This is, genius level, implementation of this innovation. In my opinion, pushing the borders of imaging from satellite imagery and identifying rock types, and then testing it with the drill rig. And we proved that our exploration methodology worked at C4. We tested another target called Cana Brava that had been tested or drilled by previous operators. We hit mineralization there. We tested some other targets where we hit the right rock type, but it wasn't mineralized. We hit mineralization in some other zones near to resources, but generally it was, we broke away from the main aspect of phase one, which was drilling at Trapia 1 to test these targets, made a discovery, advanced a target, and tested another target, which wasn't as good, but I thought it was very successful. And now a second rig has arrived to leg out the rest of the exploration program, or phase two. It finished up on Trapia 1 because the results came back from Trapia 1. They were positive, so we decided to drill more to the south. That second rig came in and helped the drilling to finish off phase one at Trapia 1. And then we moved over to a second target called Trapia 2. That'll be done this week. And then we're moving up to a project area called Santa Amaro, which is in the north. Both rigs will be up there testing some pretty broad intervals of ultramafic mineralized unit. And so we're going to walk away at the end of November, completing the first ever drill program that we've conducted on the property. And at the same time, we're working away on the metallurgy and the processing, trying to answer questions there. And so all that will sort of come to a head in Q4. We'll have a good picture, which targets were ripe for discovery, target advancement, resource expansion. What are the grades like? What are the ideas we're having on moving the project forward in terms of development with respect to processing, ore sorting, metallurgical conditions. So it's been a pretty active year. It started slow, but I feel like we're pretty active now, to be honest.
Jim, this ongoing theme continues to come up as I'm listening, and that's kind of a theme of innovation, maybe some creative disruption, not only on the exploration side, but also on the engineering and processing side, as you mentioned. When it comes to using innovation for in junior resources, it's almost like a double-edged sword sometimes, right? And so I'm just kind of curious, why is Valore in a great position to try maybe some new disruptive things with their exploration techniques, while, say, other companies maybe don't get that luxury?
I think we all, it's a huge mistake not to take advantage of it. I mean, if you think about the advances, even in the recycling business, for example, those separation of streams, why would you not take what they have learned in massive industries like that and say, look, if if this rock is white and this rock is brown and this rock is green and we want the brown or the black rock, use some sort of visual sorting to get rid of the green and the white rocks. Like we don't want to run those through our mill. We don't want to run those through our plant. They're the wrong color, and the visual sort can help us with that. And you obviously have to walk through a whole bunch of ore characterization studies before you make the determination. But that's one example. In uranium deposits, radiometric sorts work incredibly well. If it's radioactive, it's the mineral you want in the uranium deposit, and if it's not radioactive, kick it out. For people not to go through these processes, which of course most companies do, but that's just totally foolhardy, because what you really want is, if you're mining, you want the least amount of ore to go through your processing facility as possible, because that means it's as small as possible. The cap costs are as small as possible. Probably the operating costs are lower, and your margin's higher, and it's less disruptive. So why not figure that out in advance? So we're doing all these things, and we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're not building the mine tomorrow. We're literally, we got 2 drill rigs on it, and we got a whole bunch of super smart people on it. But luckily, we've started with over 1 million ounce resource from previous operators that we can start from in all these zones and build from them, and try to target other zones that look like them or similar to them, and know all that we can based on about 385 drill holes.
There still seems like there's a segment of resource speculator out there that once they see a company is starting to do things differently or use innovations, the first thought is, oh, there's something wrong with the deposit. Like, this isn't going to be economic, because they're reverting to innovation and taking a risk of trying new technologies to try to make this thing work. Do you see that at all? I mean, as a general observation?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people that I've worked with in the past say, that doesn't work. We already tried that. And you say, well, when did you try that? And they say, like, 1984. Well, that's a long time ago. And so a lot is advanced. However, sound thinking and logic should still prevail. If the most up-to-date form of a study proves that it doesn't work, it isn't worthwhile trying that study over and over again in the same way. But what I'm talking about here isn't like crazy innovation to sort rock by color or weight or mass or color or what have you. Isn't actually that far out of the realm of what's normal practice these days.
Yeah.
And but what I guess my attitude right now is, if we're raising money to roll drill rigs around the project, we're obviously still in exploration mode. So why wouldn't we have that same kind of concept or thought process around processing or ore sorting or whatever? We're in exploration mode. We're trying to figure out how to maximize the value of this project. So that's what we're doing. We're not trying to reinvent many wheels, but we're going to try to use the best wheel possible, let's say.
Yeah. I know I've kept you longer than I said I would, but I did want to get your thoughts here on just your general consensus on Platinum Group element projects right now, where we are in this market. I mean, it is a little bit of a different beast from, say, gold and silver, and we saw that huge run-up in precious metals. But platinum, palladium, I mean, these metals have done extraordinary things this year, and with their spot price. But yet, from my observation is that, like, we're still not seeing that frenzy of capital into these plays like we saw in gold and silver earlier this summer. As a CEO of a company, an exploration company with the PGE group project, are you fighting for gold and silver capital right now?
Yeah, I think we always are. Regardless of the marketplace. There are certain, when you have a less understood mineral commodity, for example, uranium or palladium, platinum or rhodium or all these other minerals, it's a niche audience, and something needs to happen to trigger the generalist investor to come into that marketplace. I mean, you've seen that with, like, say, lithium or something, where you have people like racing in because Tesla got involved or something. That would be an example of how some switch was flicked and the generalist investor flooded into a certain less understood marketplace. But I think the most people in the world would understand the value of gold. They won't dispute it. Silver is a little less understood, but certainly it's still got a large audience. With respect to palladium, the prices have been spectacular. Platinum, not as much. It's still in sort of in 8 to 900 range, so it's range bound down there. Rhodium is the price is spectacular, the rise in pricing. But that, I think where the squeeze is, where I recognize a squeeze, it's highly concentrated in terms of where it's produced, and it's highly concentrated by the number of companies that produce it. So actually supply, the primary supply, if you take two countries, South Africa and Russia, they have almost 80% of primary supply of PGs. And the major, like 4 or 5 companies control roughly 80-85%. So that's pretty concentrated for an industry. The gold sector is not like that at all. And I think there is some concentration, but there's lots of smaller producers out there, and it's not the same. It's not the same case with palladium or platinum. In Brazil, there is no PG production, so we're a pioneer to that effect. But there's lots of gold production. There's lots of mining production there. It's not some weird mineral that people are going to shut down because they're afraid of it or something. So that won't be the issue. We just, we need to do our job as a company, make the exploration successful, make discoveries, put this project on the map from a district scale potential, and then answer the questions that I was talking about. So people say, look, it's an impressive district with high grade, shallow mineralization, and we can advance it through development. They're answering the questions that we need to answer. That's what we need to do.
Yeah. Jim, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on and giving us that rundown of Valore. So thank you so much. Is there a way that people who have follow-up questions for you might be able to reach out to you?
100%. ValoreMetals.com. You can email us at contact@ValoreMetals.com. And we will do our best to respond rapidly.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. That's Jim Paterson. He's the chairman and CEO of Valore, which trades on the TSX with the symbol VO and also on the OTC with KVLQF.